Hello everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video, I'll be showing you my updated 2022 House prediction, where I stand on the US House of Representatives elections, and where I think these elections are going to go. So, before we get started with that, I do want to briefly say that it's important we talk about the national environment, which obviously is shown in the generic ballot polling. So, as of today, the Democratic Party holds a lead of about 1.2% in these generic ballot polls. And that is fairly significant, I would say, because it's the largest lead the Democrats have held for all of 2022. And it's the largest lead that they've actually held since November of last year. And back in November, there weren't as many polls. You can see every dot on this graph shows a poll. As we get closer to the election, we get more and more polls. The Democratic leads back in 2021 didn't really matter because we didn't have that much polls and because there wasn't really a national contest to be focusing on the way there is now. And now, Republicans had a large lead starting in November, and they held on to that lead until the end of July. But Democrats started to gain momentum. They started to gain up kind of an upward trajectory in the polls, and they've just been surging really the past 2 weeks. And we talked about a post Labor Day bump for the Republicans. So far, we haven't been seeing that. Again, a lot can change between now and election day, but right now the Democrats have the momentum. Right now, the Democratic Party, seems to be in the driver's seat, and they have a 1.2% lead in generic ballot. And I actually think that's pretty similar to where we are right now. Again, some people might be skeptical. They might think, oh, well, national polls underestimated Trump by 3% in 2020. So if that happens again, Republicans would still win the generic ballot by, 2 or 3 points. But the issue with that is that I think the polls have mostly, this is a hot take, but I think the polls have mostly overcorrected or fixed their mistakes from 2020. And there's actually proof of that. So, for example, in Virginia, when Youngkin beat McAuliffe, he was up by 2% on the 538 average on election day. And the California recall, Newsom actually, he was only up by, I think, 13% on election day in the 538 average, and he ended up winning by 27 in his recall election. And when you look at the special election polls we didn't get many, but in the Texas the Texas 34 special election back in June, the Democrats lost it, but the one poll we got, I think, had the Republicans doing about 2% better than they actually did. And then most importantly, in the recent, the post-Dobbs elections, Minnesota won. The one poll that we got out of that race, I think, had Republicans winning by double digits. They only won by 4. And then most of all, when you look at the New York 19 polls, they vastly underestimated Pat Ryan, the Democrat who ended up winning that special election. As you can see right here, the polls, he was down by 14, down by 3, down by 10, down by 3. And then in the final poll, which was the day of, he was down by 8. And so ultimately, the polls mostly overcorrected for 2020 because they thought, look, we were so bad in 2020 and we all missed in the direction of the Democrats that, we should try to fix our polls. And what they did was they actually overcompensated and they fixed the polls too much. They gave the Republicans too much of a boost, and that, we saw the final poll from a Democratic internal that, again, this year's been really bad, but even a Democratic poll had Molinaro up by 8%, and he lost that election. And so ultimately, I think the polls are going to, nationally, probably be pretty accurate. They might underestimate Republicans by half a point, if that, but I work under the assumption that we're in a pretty neutral national environment. I think I can see any range of outcomes from R+1 to D+2. If I had to guess, we're probably a national environment that's very marginally Democratic leaning, so maybe D +0.4, D +0.5. That would be my specific guess right now. But I think neutral to D+1 is the general range we're in specifically, and that's what the polls are showing. And again, the polls this year have underestimated Democratic support, so it's not that much of a gamble the way it might have been in 2020. So let's look at this House map here, and we're going to be talking about 2 maps. So the first one, I think I'll get it out of the way here. So this is my prediction map, but I did build a model that I wanted to show you guys because I think it's pretty interesting. And so the model is mostly based on trends, expected partisanship, passive over performance, incumbency, and cash on hand. Again, I wrote a fair bit about it. I posted this on Twitter a few weeks back, but ultimately, the model that I built was actually really interesting because it showed the Democratic Party having a very, very slim majority in the House. And what it really did was it thought the Democrats were going to do fairly well in the suburbs and hold on to most of their working class seats, Michigan 8, for example, Illinois 17, Indiana 1. But it had, some Democratic incumbents like Copter and Axony losing, so it wasn't very one sided. I think it was pretty reasonable. Again, these are the closest seats. If you want to pause, look at some of those, you can do that. Again, those some close ups there, but like really, I think it's a good model. It's not my exact prediction, but it's worth talking about. And again, I'll be doing two predictions, being I'll do my model and I'll do this. So that's my model for what that's worth. But we're gonna be doing a prediction where I don't use my model, where I only do, kind of what my brain and gut thinks. And so let's get into it because this can be a while. So let's start with Alaska, where again the incumbent is actually a Democrat here. Mary Peltola is the incumbent, and she won her special election back a few weeks ago over Sarah Palin. And it's going to be similar again. I do think Palin is going to finish second once again behind Peltola because it's a rematch of her, Begich, and Peltola. And I think Peltola, it'll be similar. I think Palin's going to finish second, and I think she's going to actually win this time around, though it will be very close. I expect her to win by 2 to 3%. Again, I could easily see Peltola winning, but ultimately, I think the electorate that shows up on the day of the election will be a bit more Republican than the one that showed up for the special, and I think ultimately Palin will benefit from that. Next up is Arizona. So the Republicans are going to flip 2 seats here, I believe. The first one they will flip is Arizona 2. Tom O'Halloran is in a Trump +8 district, as you can see right here. Not looking too good for him. And then the other seat that I believe the Republicans will flip is Ann Kirkpatrick's seat. She is actually not running for re-election. It's an open seat. I think it will be a little closer. I think it'll probably be 4 or 5%. But ultimately, I do expect the Republican Party to end up flipping the seat. I also expect them to hold on to Arizona 1. This is a seat that Biden won by 1.5 points. And, David Schweikert is a decent incumbent, and, he ran ahead of Trump in 2020. But at the end of the day, it's a left trending seat, so I could see it flipping in 2024, but I think it's too soon right now, especially considering it only narrowly voted for Joe Biden. Then finally, originally I thought that Arizona 4 was a toss-up, back in the spring, but I've moved it to likely D. I'm pretty confident that Greg Stan's going to win. He's in a Biden +11 seat. He's a good incumbent. He, doesn't really have that great of an opponent. Kelly Cooper's not someone who I think is capable of flipping a seat that's as Democratic as Arizona 4 is, and I expect Greg Stanton to hold on by about 6 or 7%. Now, for California, we got a lot. So let's go to Los Angeles first. Let's get these southern seats. So I think, California 47 and 49 are similar. These are coastal Orange County seats that ultimately I do expect to go Democratic by similar amounts. I think California 49 will be a bit closer with Levin, the Democratic incumbent there, winning by about 5 to 6%. But I think Porter will win by 8. Again, she's in a seat that I think is about a point below, but she's also a very good incumbent. She has so much money on hand. She's going to outspend her opponent, Scott Baugh, by a ton. And, she actually did win the primary vote outright in this seat because she's just a really good incumbent. Now, for these other seats, I think that I'm going to move California 45 down from likely to lean Republican. This is a Biden +6 seat. So, it's still a fairly Democratic leaning seat at the top of the ticket, but down ballot, it's much more Republican. It also is fairly right. It's kind of right trending. And Michelle Steele is a good enough incumbent to hold on. But I think in 2024, I could see it potentially being a toss-up. It really depends on who the Democrats recruit to run against her. Again, Jay Chen is her current opponent, and I don't think that Jay Chen is that good of a candidate. Again, he still has to prove himself, so I could be proven wrong, but I expect Steele to beat Chen by about 4 to 5%. My model thinks he'll be a little closer, but ultimately it's Southern California. It's more Republican down ballot. Now, California 40 and 41, I think, are going to be likely Republican. Ken Calvert didn't really do too well in the primary, but he's going to win re-election because this is still a seat that Donald Trump won by about a point, and I don't think it's going to be particularly, Democrats might try to beat Michelle Steele, but I don't think they'll try to beat Ken Calvert. California 40, Young Kim, very good incumbent, big overperformer, and ultimately I expect her to win re-election by probably upwards of 5%, if we're being honest here. It could be a little closer, but yeah. Now, let's go over to California 27. This is a seat that I think Democrats have a good chance of actually flipping. This is Mike Garcia's seat. He originally won a special election back in May of 2020, then won re-election by 300 votes over Christy Smith. But that was in a Biden +10 seat. And now that he is in a Biden +13, I think nearly Biden +14, actually, if I recall correctly, it's Biden +13. And, very left trending seat. It's a district that, the Republicans only won the primary vote here by like half a point. And primaries in California tend to be about 5% more Republican than the general. So if you apply that swing, that really helps Christy Smith, his Democratic opponent. And, Christy Smith, I think, is running a better campaign than she ran in 2020. And to me, that's enough for her to beat Garcia. It's in a post-obs world, I think polarization hurts Republicans in the suburbs, and ultimately, I think it'll be enough to give Christy Smith the victory over Mike Garcia by, I believe, 2 to 3%. Another flip for Democrats in California. That's California 22. It's a big. It's to me, it's like a battle of the beasts. David Valadao and Rudy Salas are both very, very good politicians. David Valadao in 2020, he was able to win a Biden plus 10 seat. He's got redistricted into a Biden plus 13 seat. So again, he's in a seat he's won blue seats before, but this is the bluest he's ever had to run in. And he's running against Rudy Salas, who's a very good opponent. Rudy Salas is from a Biden plus 12 state assembly district from the region. He won by 20, so he outran Biden by 8%. He has much better appeal to Hispanics than your average Democrat. And, again, Hispanic turnout and, these local operations is what matters the most in the Central Valley. And, in 28, Valadao's win in 2020 was good, but it wasn't it didn't really knock my socks off. TJ Cox was a weak incumbent, and he wasn't particularly, well known in the region, and Valadao was just a better politician. And ultimately, I do expect Rudy Salas to run a better campaign than TJ Cox did, and polarization will hurt Republicans in Southern California, and ultimately, I expect the seat to narrowly flip, call it a 1-point victory for Rudy Salas. Now, California 13 is a seat that I think a lot of people have been, fairly interested in because it's kind of a low-profile race. Adam Gravers, John Duarte. It's still a Biden plus 11.4 seat, but out of an abundance of caution, I'll probably keep it as lean Democratic. I could easily see it being in the likely column. Honestly, it's way closer to likely than toss-up, but functionally at this point, I expect it to go Democratic by about 5%. California 9 is not particularly interesting. It's I think it's a Biden plus 16 seat. Or no, it's Biden plus 13. Yeah, okay. I'll put it as likely D here. It's a little better than I originally anticipated, but it'll still go blue by 7 or 8%, somewhere in that category. Republicans aren't really targeting it, and it's the Democratic incumbent, so it'll probably be fine, barring a big red wave in California. And finally, California 3. It's a left trending seat. It's only Trump plus 2, and Kermit Jones is a good candidate for the Democrats, but Kevin Kiley's a state senator, and he's, I think, good enough to hold it fairly comfortably, although this is a seat that I think could flip in 2024. Now, that's California. That was a lot. Stick with me here. So, Colorado, we have a few interesting seats here. I think Perlmutter is going to win by like 10 or something. He's in a Biden plus 14.5 seat. I mean, I could easily see him, maybe he wins by 12 or something, but I think I'll put it as likely. Here again, he probably won't win by more than 15. We're doing this by margin, not by probability. It's saved by probability, likely by margin. Colorado Wade's very close, though. It's a seat that Biden won by 4.7. And again, it is very, very, it's very, very interesting because it's often used as a tipping point seat. Again, if Democrats were to win the House, Colorado Wade would probably be one of the closest seats that they'd have to narrowly pull off. And right now, I don't think it's going too well for them. When you take a look at the polls we've gotten out of Colorado Wade, we're going to go U.S. House, State Colorado. They haven't really been good for the Democrats. In this seat right here, the Democratic internal, again, it was commissioned a little earlier than it was actually released, but it had Kirkmeyer up by 2. This other poll, which is commissioned by a Democratic internal, had her up by 8. Again, this is back from June, but again, I think it'll be closer than the polls are suggesting, but still, the fact that the Democrats don't have a lead in any of the polls yet, and even in their own internals, is pretty bad for them. So I guess we'll err on the side of caution, give it to the Republicans very narrowly. Connecticut, I don't really think these seats are interesting. They're fairly Biden-leaning. Courtney's in a seat that Biden won by 10. Hayes in a seat that Biden won by 11. And I don't really think the Republicans are interested in playing in Connecticut this year. Maybe if it were a less polarized environment, I could see it. But, the Dobbs decision really hurts Republicans in more Democratic-leaning areas. Florida. Again, some of these seats are just likely by a margin, or by margin. Take a look at District 4, for example. It's only R plus 7. District. And District 5 is actually, District 5 won't be close because it's R plus 16, so it'll be safe by a margin. I think District 7 will also be likely by margin. It's only Trump plus 5, so it'll probably be, single digits, but it'll go Republican. Districts 13 and 15 are, marginal Trump seats, but Democrats in Florida always lose the close races, and I don't really think they're seriously contesting them this year. So these should be, Florida 13 will be a Republican pickup. Florida 15 will be a Republican hold. Then finally, Florida 27 is a seat that voted for Trump by about a point, but it's very, very left trending. It's a seat where or Maria Villasales is a good incumbent. She'll probably win by 10-11%, even though like this is a seat that is just so much more Republican down ballot and is very left trending. So I expect the Republicans to hold on to it fairly easily. Georgia 2, Sanford Bishop. That seat might have been a sleeper flip prior to the primary, but the Republicans didn't get their preferred candidate, Chris West. Ended up getting nominated, and it's still a Biden plus 10.5 seat. It doesn't really this seat is like one of the least swingy in the nation. It'll probably be a similar margin of victory for Bishop. He's a good incumbent. I think he'll be fine. Illinois, there are a few suburban seats in Chicago that I don't really care about. These are, well, I made a mistake there. These are seats that I don't really think will be particularly close. They might, be likely by margin, but ultimately they're not going to be that competitive. Again, these are all gerrymandered seats. Biden plus 11, Biden plus 15, Biden plus 12. Illinois 13 is a Biden plus 11 seat with no incumbent. Democrats are running Nikki Baginski, Baginski, I pronounced that right. Republicans are running a no-name Reagan Deering. Don't really know who she is, but ultimately, I believe it'll go Democratic by 8%, something like that. It's a gerrymandered seat. It won't really be competitive. But Illinois 17 is a really close one. It's a seat that voted for Biden by about 8%. And, Sherry Bustos is the Democratic incumbent. She actually won a Trump seat in 2020, but she retired and she kind of put the seat back on the board for the Republicans. And, they're running a good candidate, Esther Joy King. She did decently well. She was the nominee in 2020. She did decently well. And she has a lot more money than the Democratic candidate, Eric Sorensen. It's also a right trending district that I think will probably flip in 2024 if it goes blue this year. But at the end of the day, I expect this seat to narrowly vote Democratic. Again, it's a pure toss-up. If it votes Republican, I will not be surprised at all. But it's bluer down ballot. It's still Biden plus 8, and these seats tend to not swing as much in midterms. And I think it'll there's a large enough margin of error that I think Democrats will be fine here, or will win here. Not be fine, it'll be close. But yeah, Indiana 1. I go back and forth between lean and likely Democrat. It's D plus 8.5, but it's very right trending, and Jennifer Ruth Green's a good candidate. But at the same time, I think we got one poll out of Indiana 1, if I recall correctly. Yeah, it was from RMG, which again is commissioned in May, so it was from pre-Dobbs. It was from RMG Research, which is a more Republican-leaning poll, and it showed Mervyn up by 7. That's enough for me to believe it's going to go Democratic by upwards of 5%, and ultimately Mervyn being a good incumbent probably is enough for him to hold on. Iowa 2 and 1 are probably going to be like marginal GOP seats. They were both lean R in 2020. I think that they'll go Republican by 7 to 10% in 2022. But again, these are seats that are like kind of sleepers for, they could be closer than expected. Again, I don't think the Democrats have any real chance of winning these seats. They don't really have good opponents here. Liz Mathis is a decent challenger to Ashley Hinson, but Christina Bohannon is a no name, to be honest. And I don't think the Democrats will be playing too much in Iowa this year because they're going to get smoked by Grassley and Reynolds at the top of the ticket, and that's not really enough for them to do well statewide. Now, Iowa 3 is interesting because Cindy Axne is a very good incumbent. She has a lot of money, but she's in a Trump plus 0.4 seat. So it'll be very, very close. Originally I was pretty sure Axne was going to lose, but now I'm a little bit less sure. That being said, it's still a Trump seat. It's still Iowa, and while it might be a little bluer down ballot, I still don't think it's enough for Axne to hold on. So that's Iowa, although again, this is a pure toss-up here in my opinion. Kansas. So Kansas 3 actually, I shouldn't say Kansas 1. Kansas 3 voted for Biden by 4.5%, but it's very left-trending. In fact, it was Trump plus 6 in 2020, and actually trended nearly 10% to the left between 2016 and 2020, making it the most left-trending contested seat of this midterm. So ultimately, I think it'll be close, but ultimately I believe Sharice Davids will win. And it honestly could be a lean margin. I wouldn't be surprised, but I think out of an abundance of caution, I'll put it as tilt. Just to be cautious here because it's still fairly close. Kentucky, nothing going on there. Maine, Jared Golden, he's in a very tough race for re-election. He's in the Trump plus 6 district that ultimately, is very right trending. But he's a good incumbent. He won a Trump plus 8 seat in 2020 by I think 6%. And Bruce Poliquin's not really good opponent. He's not super popular in Maine District 2, and ultimately Golden has a lot of crossover appeal. So I think I'll put it as lean Republican again. I do believe that ultimately the trend's going to catch up to Golden, and the Republicans are going to outspend or are going to kind of play hardball in Maine this year. Because in 2020 they didn't really contest Golden. He actually won by a lot less than the polls expected. And when you take a look at what he was expected to win by in 2020, his performance actually wasn't that impressive. I'll pull up Maine U.S. House polls again. we do have one poll. It's from Fabrizio only. It has Golden up by 7, in fairness. But if you look at our 2020 polls in Maine, Golden was up by 9 in this poll. He was up by 25 in this poll, up by 28 in this poll. And like he was supposed to win by a lot more than he ended up winning by. And ultimately, I think he's a bit overrated of an incumbent. And look, he's really good at it, and he'll he'll outperform everyone. But um, this is one of the few seats where I think the Dobbs decision kind of hurts Democrats because there are a lot of pro-life Democrats in these rural areas. So I think Golden goes down by 2 to 3%, something like that. Maryland 6, I think will be there's some obsession with David Trone losing on these models. I think Nate Silver has him losing, The Economist has him losing, but he's in a Biden plus 10 seat, and he has so much money that I don't really see how he loses at this point, especially considering the Republicans are running Dan Cox to the top of the ticket, who is a very bad candidate. Maybe if they ran Kelly Schulz, I could have seen them doing better, but Cox hurts them down ballot, and I think it'll cost them this seat. Michigan, we got quite a few seats to talk about here. So first of all, Michigan 4 was originally going to go uncontested, but what ultimately ended up happening was Joseph Alfonso, the Democrat, got enough write-in signatures to appear on the ballot, and he will be going facing Bill Huizenga this November. And I think he's going to lose, but it'll be good for Democrats to have a bit of a turnout booster in Michigan because again, it's only Trump plus 4. It could be kind of competitive, but I think it will be under 10% margin of victory. But Michigan 3, this will be a flip for the Democrats, and I think it'll be by a pretty good margin, probably by 5 to 6%. Again, this is a seat that voted for Joe Biden by 8.6%. It was only Clinton plus 2, and this is one of the I think this is the only seat statewide, if I recall correctly, where Biden actually did better than Gretchen Whitmer. That just shows how left-trending it is, because literally Whitmer won by 10 statewide and Biden only won by 3 statewide, but he still managed to outrun Whitmer in this district because it's just that left-trending. And now the Republicans are running John Gibbs, who's very extreme. He said Democrats eat babies. He has basically no money. I don't think the Republicans actually think he can win. So I believe Gibbs will go down in Michigan 3. Michigan 7, this will be close. It's a bit of a hot take here, but I think that Alessa Slotkin will win, probably by a point or so. She's only in a Biden plus 1 seat, so it's kind of a hot take here. But I'm of the opinion that because she has so much money, it's a decently left-running district, and Democrats literally won the primary vote here despite having no contested primary statewide. That just goes to show how strong the Michigan Democratic primary infrastructure is, or party infrastructure is, in this seat. And also, when you remember, the abortion referendum will be on the ballot. That'll be a big turnout booster for Democrats. Whitmer's going to probably win by a good amount statewide, and Michigan 7, I think will go blue by probably 1.5, something like that. And Slotkin's a good incumbent. She won a Trump seat in 2020. Now her seat's blue, I think she'll be okay. Michigan 8, this one could be lean, in all honesty, but I think I'll just be cautious here. Again, this isn't a super left-trending seat. I think it's trended a point to the left or a point to the right in 2020. Went from, I think, Clinton plus 1 to Biden plus 2, but again, when you adjust for national environment, trended a point to the right. But that being said, Paul Jung is a really bad opponent. Kildee has a lot of money. He's a really good incumbent. He has a ton of name recognition. I think he outran Biden by I want to say 10% or something like that in 2020. And again, he didn't really have a good opponent, but he doesn't really have a good opponent this time either. So I think Michigan 8 will be tilt to Democratic. But Michigan 5, let's talk about Michigan 10. Let's talk about the polls in Michigan 10, because we've gotten a few of them, and they've shown a lot of interesting things. So if I can find Michigan first. Whoops, that's Minnesota, Michigan House. So yeah, the most recent poll, which is again from a random C- rated poll, so not too good, but it's still pretty concerning for Carl Marlinga, the Democrat. James plus 9. But in other polls, in Democratic internals, we have seen good polls from Marlinga. He released an internal showing up by 2. We saw a poll from him showing up by 4, and we've also seen polls where even independent polls show him ahead of John James. This is actually way back from January, before Dobbs and all that stuff. So again, I think if you're looking for a sleeper Democratic flip, I think Michigan 10's your best pick, because it's only Trump plus 1. That Carl Marlinga is an underrated candidate, and John James actually lost the seat in his run for Senate in 2020 to Gary Peters. But ultimately, it's still a Trump seat, and I don't really think any Trump seats without Democratic incumbents will be voting blue this year. Although again, sleeper flip for sure. Michigan or Minnesota 1. This is a seat the Republicans won the special election in by 4%, despite the fact that it was Trump plus 10. It actually got about a point more Democratic in redistricting, although I do think that polarization will catch up to, when we get to the midterms, and that'll be enough for the Republicans to win it by like 7 or 8%. Minnesota 2, I believe this seat will go to the Democratic Party by about 2%. It would probably be closer to like 4 or 5, but there's a Weed Party candidate on the ballot, which hurts Angie Craig, and it's just some complicated stuff there. And then Montana 1 is the contested seat in kind of the Missoula area. It's it's only Trump plus 8 or Trump plus 7, so it'll probably be interesting, like maybe later in the decade, but for now it's going to go red by like 12, 13 points. Nebraska, similar thing in Nebraska 1. It's a left trending seat. It'll be interesting later in the decade, but I think for now it'll stay red. But Nebraska 2, it's, there's been a lot of Nebraska 2 talk as of late, because we've seen some interesting polls, and Don Bacon came out in favor of a personhood amendment, which is why there's been talk of him potentially losing, because again, this is a pro-choice seat. He voted for Joe Biden by about 6.5%, and the Democrats are actually running it because in 2020 they ran like a socialist, and she lost by like 4 on a Biden plus 7 seats, so she was really bad. Tony Vargas is a better candidate. He's not amazing, but he's a state senator from the region who's pretty good. He knows the region fairly well. That'll help him. But, like what you're seeing here is that the polls show a lot of different things. So Tony Vargas's internal had him up by 1. And then, in this hybrid, in this like action pack, he's up by 3 and 1%. But then they showed Bacon up by 1. And then in this Republican leaning poll, Bacon's up by 15. So I don't really know what to make of the polls. For now, I'll stick with the incumbent. I'll stick with the guy who's, generally pretty good at winning elections. But again, this is, I think, is like, it's a Biden district, and people often forget that. And I think that Bacon will probably be in trouble come 2024 if not already. Nevada 2 is going to be likely by margin. It was only like Trump plus, maybe. It was Trump plus 11. I think it goes red by like 14% or something like that. I'll just err on the side of caution, be likely. Now, Nevada 4, Nevada 1, and Nevada 3 are like really hard to predict because like they're all kind of similar in partisanship. I think Nevada 1 and 4 will be like I don't know. I think I'll be cautious here, put it as lead, just say 5-point margin of victory for the Democrats. But again, that's hard to say because these seats are just so because Nevada doesn't really fluctuate. It's kind of similar every election, no matter what the national environment is. So ultimately, I think Nevada 4 and Nevada 1 are going to stay blue, but probably by maybe I'll just put Nevada 4 as likely because like Horsford's a slightly better incumbent than Titus, but they're both good incumbents. And I don't know. His seat's also a bit more left trending, which helps. And then Nevada 3, I think will be still Democratic. It's Biden plus 6.7, and Becker's a good opponent, and I think she's ahead in I think she's ahead in most of the polls, but I think Cortez Masto and Sisolak going to do better statewide than people think, and that'll probably carry Lee over the line. New Hampshire, I think Custer's in a likely D race. It's a Biden plus 9 seat. She's a good incumbent. I think she wins by like 6 or 7. And again, Bolduc will probably get the GOP nomination. Like we'll know tonight, but I think he'll get the GOP nomination. He'll hurt Republicans at the top of the ticket. And then New Hampshire 1 is a seat that was Biden plus 6, and Pappas is a good incumbent, but I think he'll underperform Biden by a bit. But like again, this is still a good showing because I'm expecting the national environment to be like D plus 0.5. So that would be like a 4-point swing towards the GOP. And that kind of lines up with what I'm thinking here. Because it's a Biden plus 6 seat, swing at 4% to the right by a D plus 2. I think it'll be similar, maybe a little bluer, because New Hampshire, tends to be weird in midterms, and we can see anything really happening here. But this is a left trending seat. It's a seat that voted for Shaheen by like I think double digits in 2020, and it's also super pro-choice, and I think that will bail out Chris Pappas. Originally, like people who looked at my house predictions from like May and June, I think I'd Pappas losing by like half a point at one point, but now I think he'll win. New Jersey, not too much to say here again. There are some seats that I think could be interesting, like the New Jersey 2, for example, will be likely by margin. I don't really see anything else here too interesting. And then Andy Kim's in a Biden plus 14 seat. He'll win by a safe margin, or maybe a little, maybe like 13. But he won a Trump seat in 2020. He's really good incumbent. He'll win. But New Jersey 5, New Jersey 7 are pretty interesting. So New Jersey 5 was Biden plus 12.5. Gottheimer has a ton of cash in hand, but he's not too great of an incumbent. And I think he'll win by like 8 or 7 or 8 or something like that. New Jersey 7 is really interesting though, because originally it was off the board. Originally, it was supposedly, kind of a done deal that the Republicans were going to pick it up. But, recent events have really given the Democrats more momentum here. Again, Tom Malinowski, not the best incumbent in terms of electability. He only won a Biden plus 10 seat by 1% in 2020, and he's a fairly controversial figure in New Jersey politics, too. And Tom Keene's a good opponent. He's has a moderate name. He's the son of the former governor who was fairly popular. And like at the end of the day, for Republicans to win suburban left-running seats like this, they have to do well with pro-choice voters. And I think Keene's a good candidate. And I think that'll be enough to get him over the top by probably 2 or 3%. But again, Malinowski has a cash advantage, and um, like Democrats have like outperformed in all the special elections post Dobbs, and I think abortion really hurts the GOP in a seat like this. Like it probably would have like it was likely Republican to prior to the Dobbs decision, but now it's much more in play for the Democrats. New Mexico, New Mexico 1 and 3 are going to probably be likely D. This one was Biden plus 15. New Mexico 3 was Biden plus 10. Probably similar in terms of margin of victory for the Democrats. New Mexico 2 is interesting though, because it is a seat that like has not moved at all. 2016, Clinton won it by 5.9. 2020, Biden won it by 5.7. And it's like a bit blurred down ballot. In like the old iteration of the district, it was like Trump plus 10, but the Democrat Xochitl Torres Small, the incumbent, she only lost by 6%. And like it's kind of a battle of like not really great politicians. Like Yvette Herrell doesn't really have a ton of money. She's not super well known in the region, and she's a very like underwhelming incumbent. But Gabe Vasquez also isn't that good, and he's running like a very left wing campaign. And I think that'll be enough for him to narrowly go down here. I think it'll be like about a point margin of victory for the Republicans. But yeah, that's I think where we'll be at the end of the day here. But either way, like it's kind of a sleeper flip because like the seat literally doesn't move and it's not really trending in any direction. So I think it'll be close. New York got a lot of seats to talk about here. So New York 1 and New York 2 are both narrow Trump seats. I think that they're going to be like New York 1, actually, I might have to put in the lean Republican column just because there's no incumbent. He'll probably be Republican, win it by 4 or 5. New York 2 will be likely, though. Garbarino's the good, he's an incumbent. Then New York 3 is a kind of right-trending Biden plus 8.5 seat. It'll be, I guess, kind of contested, but I think the Republicans aren't going to really do too much in New York because they don't really have any good statewide candidates. And then in New York 4, Kathleen Rice in a Biden plus 15 seat. She'll probably win by a likely margin. Then in New York 11, I believe, Maliotakis, Trump plus 7 seat, Staten Island. She'll probably win by 10 or something. Like Democrats did win the district in 2018 when it was like Trump plus 9 or something with Max Rose, and he's running again against Maliotakis, and he's a good she's a good challenger, but it's still a Trump plus 7 seat. It's still not really particularly like left trending or anything, so I don't think it's really much of a chance of an upset. Then so then New York 17, Sean Patrick Maloney, the Democratic nominee there. It's a Biden plus 10 seat. I think he'll win by maybe a little less, but Republicans aren't really going to be contesting him there. New York 18, Pat Ryan will be the Democratic nominee here, running against a no-name Republican candidate. It's a Biden plus 8.5 seat, and he won a Biden plus 1 seat in that special election by about 2%. Again, you can argue that the special election was a little bit more tilted towards Democrats because Democrats generally have a turnout edge in special elections due to them having, because like part of the coalition change is that Democrats are now more likely to turn out in most special elections than Republicans, which wasn't the case in the past, but now it is. And it's mostly because Democrats have a base of more college-educated voters. And, the average Democrat will pay more attention because the average Democrat is more educated. They'll probably pay a bit more attention to politics. Like they're more likely to know there's a special election. And that's why, you could say, oh, well, maybe like in a Biden plus 1 seat, like if it were held on election day, Molinaro would have won. But either way, the fact that Pat Ryan was able to win that election despite being down in the polls, despite the fact that Molinaro was still a really good candidate, again, in his 2018 New York governorship bid, he won the seat by like 10% against Andrew Cuomo. And, he was a really good candidate. And the fact that Molinaro was able to win is really impressive. So I'll say, or that Ryan was able to win is really impressive. So I'll say Pat Ryan's going to win his new seat by like 6% again. He outran Biden in his special election. I think he'll, do pretty well this time around too. New York 19 is going to be really close, or not really close, but I think it'll be close. But again, Mark Molinaro couldn't win a Biden plus 1 seat, and again, Pat Ryan was a good candidate, but like at the end of the day, it was still a race Molinaro should have won. and now he's running a seat that's almost 4% more Democratic, and also his home base, Dutchess County, is right here. It was in the old New York 19, and it's now in New York 18, which he's not running in. And like Molinaro actually did pretty poorly everywhere in New York 19 except for Dutchess County, which is like the only county he actually did pretty well in. It like I think he outran Trump by like 6% in Dutchess County in his special election. Um, so like that's his home base, like that's where he's from. It's where he does well. It's not even in his new district, and his new district is bluer. So Josh Riley is like not as good of a candidate as Pat Ryan was, which gives Molinaro a chance. But at the end of the day, Cornell turnout, which is right here in Tompkins County, is going to be really good. And abortion really hurts the GOP in a seat like this. So I think it goes blue by about 2 or 3%. New York 22. This is a Biden plus 7.5 seat. John Katko is the Republican incumbent. He probably would have won if he ran for re-election. Now the Republicans have to run a no-name. Francis Cannoli is the Democratic nominee. He's not too great of a candidate, but I think at the end of the day, he'll do enough to win by 4 or 5%. Fairly moderate margin of victory there. Now, North Carolina, we got some interesting seats to talk about here. So the first we'll do is North Carolina 14. This is a Biden plus 17 seat that I think will actually be a safe in terms of margin of victory, which is that I'm actually moving it from likely to safe. Originally I thought it would be below 15. Now I think it'll be kind of at 15, so I won't complicate things there. I also want to say at North Carolina 9, which is the seat right here, will be likely. It's only Trump plus 9, and it's like not super right trending, so I think it'll go Republican by 13 or 14%, which is on the 15% threshold. Same with in North Carolina 7, I could maybe see. I don't know. I mean, some of these partisanships are kind of weird because like North Carolina 11 with Chuck Edwards is R plus 10, and this one's R plus 11. I think I'll leave them alone for now, but I could see them narrowing up. Now, as for North Carolina 6 and North Carolina 1, I think these are seats the Democrats are going to do fairly well in. Again, Kathy Manning's a good incumbent. I think she'll probably win by like 10. North Carolina could be a little closer, but I think having Sherry Beasley on the ballot will boost Democratic turnout, especially with black voters, enough for the Democrat Don Davis, who is a black state senator, to beat Sandy Smith. And again, the seat is kind of right trending, but it didn't really move a ton from 2020 to 2016, so I think it'll still be Republican. They're still probably kind of stay the same, still go Democratic. And then North Carolina 13, I think, will narrowly vote Republican. Again, Sherry Beasley, I think, might actually win the seat at the top of the ticket, but I think Beasley's going to outrun Democrats at the bottom of the ticket by probably like 2 or 3%, maybe. Maybe a little less, but Beasley's going to help Democrats in seats in the majority of black seats, but I think the Democrats still going to run behind her at the bottom of the ticket. And Wiley Nichols not that great of a candidate either, and he's not really running a good campaign, so I think even though it's a Biden plus 2 seat, I still think it'll narrowly vote Republican. North Dakota, nothing going on there. Ohio, a few things to do here. So Ohio's really interesting because there are like some marginal seats. Like for example, Ohio 15 and Ohio 10 are seats that I think are actually going to be likely in terms of margin of victory. This one's only Trump plus 4, and Ohio 15 it was only like I think Trump plus Trump plus 7. So I think Ohio 15 will be a Republican in terms of it will be likely in terms of margin of victory, but again, doesn't really mean the Democrats have any real chance of winning it. And yeah, so let's talk about these 3 seats because they're really interesting. So the first one that I'll get rid of here is Ohio 9. That's Marcy Copter's seat. It's a very right-trending district. It's mostly working class voters that were really strong for Trump, but voted, for Richard Cordray, for Sherrod Brown, and for Copter. So it's a seat that's more Democratic down ballot, but the fact that it's still Trump plus 3 and the fact that it's trending to the right, I think will be enough to knock off Copter, although it will be closer than I originally anticipated. Same with Ohio 13. I originally had this race as pretty likely Republican. I'm actually putting it in tilt Republican now just because it's going to be, I think, fairly close. Again, it's a Biden plus 3 seat. It's not super left trending though. And so that hurts Democrats, but it's the seat is mostly a game of Akron turnout, and generally speaking, Akron turnout's not really good in the midterms, but the Democratic nominee Amelia Sykes is actually from Akron. She's a state representative, and I think she'll do fairly well in the city itself, but I don't know if it'll be enough. Tim Ryan will probably win the district at the top of the ticket, but at the end of the day, I just don't think it'll be enough for the Democrats, although this is definitely an underrated seat. But Ohio 1, I think I'm moving it from tilt Republican to tilt Democratic. Again, This is a seat that is very left running and voted for Joe Biden by over 8.5%. And yeah, Steve Cabot's a good incumbent, but he doesn't have as large of a cash advantage as he really needs. And, I don't think Greg Landsman is the greatest candidate for the Democrats either, but this is a super left running seat, very pro choice. And Tim Ryan's going to win it by probably, upwards of 5% at the top of the ticket. So I think it narrowly flips, goes Democratic this year. Oklahoma, nothing going on there. Oregon 6-4, pretty solidly Democratic. They're both Biden plus 13 seats. I think they're going to go Democratic by good amounts. Oregon 5's close. I think it could be kind of interesting, but they're because the Republicans keep releasing polls where they're ahead in Oregon 5, which is interesting because they're really contesting it. Again, this poll shows Chavez Durham beating Cleo Skinner by 10. This poll, I think there's another one. Yeah, this poll from PPP shows McLeod Skinner down by a point, although it's from June, so pre-Dobbs. I think Dobbs hurts the Republicans in Oregon 5, which is why I I think they would have won it before, but I'll just I don't really know because there's no Democratic incumbent, there's no cash advantage in the race, and it's just kind of a race that's kind of goofy overall. And so prior to Dobbs, I would have maybe had his tilt Republican, but now out of an abundance of caution, I think I'll put it as tilt Democratic. Pennsylvania, we got quite a few seats to talk about here. So the first ones I want to knock off are Pennsylvania 1, Pennsylvania 10. Pennsylvania 1's a seat that narrowly voted for Joe Biden, but it's Fitzpatrick's really good incumbent. He'll probably win by 10 when it's all said and done. He's, he won a Biden seat in 2020, and the Democrats thought they could actually beat him, and he won by 13, so he's very good. He's going to hang on. Pennsylvania 10, this is a Trump plus 4 seat, if I recall correctly. Scott Perry is the incumbent here. Will probably win by something 10, 11%. And then now these 3 seats are going to be more competitive. So I think Pennsylvania 17 will go to the Democrats by about 3 to 4%. It's left trending. It's a very pro-choice seat, and Chris DeLuzio, I think, is good enough to hold on to it. Pennsylvania 8, I believe, will also go Democratic. Matt Cartwright's the Democratic incumbent here, and I think is going to do fairly well. This is actually a Trump seat that I have the Democrats winning. I think this is the only Trump seat I have them winning. Yeah, because I've Copter and Axne and Marlinga losing. So this is the lone, I think, Trump seated Democratic incumbent that's going to hold on this year. So Cartwright, again, he's a really good incumbent. He has a lot of money, cash on hand, and I think Fetterman and Shapiro are going to do very well at the top of the ticket, which will boost Democratic turnout, especially in the city of Scranton. The seat is decently pro-choice, and I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be a bit less Republican as a result of the Dobbs decision. And then, most importantly, Jim Bognet's a really bad opponent for Matt Cartwright, and Cartwright's going to outspend him and blitz him on TV and point out all of his, potential bad characteristics. So I think that's going to hurt Bognet, and Cartwright will narrowly hold on. But then in Pennsylvania 7, Susan Wild's just not a good enough incumbent to hold on. It's only a Biden plus 0.6 seat. She's, she has run a not really that great of a campaign. And in addition to that, her opponent, Elisa Scheller, is not bad enough to, I think, blow this race away. So I expect Susan Wild's seat to flip Republican. As you can see here, Republicans just 1 seat away from the majority. Watch for that. Rhode Island, there's been a lot of hype about Rhode Island too. It's a Biden plus 13 seat, but the Republicans have a really good candidate. Alan Fung, the mayor of Cranston, who actually did do fairly well in the seat in his run for governor. I still think he's going to lose, but he's kind of an underrated pick for potential sleeper flip for the Republicans, but I still think he'll go red or go blue by 6-7%. Nothing going on in South Dakota. Nothing going on in South Dakota. Tennessee. I think this will be likely in terms of margin of victory, but it'll be safe in terms of probability. Texas got a few things to do here. So, first of all, just talk briefly about Beth Van Duyn's seat. I think her seat is very very underrated in terms of how close it could be. It's Trump plus 12, but it's super left. It's super left running. So I think it'll actually be kind of a similar margin of victory for Beth Van Duyn. Wait, no, that's Kay Granger's seat. Sorry, this is Beth Van Duyn's seat. Kay Granger's going to win by a lot more than that. And then I also think the Republicans are going to win Texas 15. Again, Democrats have a bit of hype here because Michelle Vallejo is a progressive candidate who has gotten a fair bit of money, but Monica De La Cruz is a good Republican candidate, and ultimately super this seat is so right trending that I don't think the Democrats can really catch up here. Then in Texas 34, this is another right trending seat that I think the Democrats are going to have problems in later in the decade, but for now it's a Biden plus 16 seat, and the running good candidate Vicente Gonzalez, who is the Democratic congressman from the other seat, who's kind of carpetbagging, but whatever. And I think he'll win by 6 or 7% against Myra Flores, who won the special election, but again, she's not as well known in the area as Gonzalez. Then Cuellar versus Garcia, very, very close race there. It'll be, it's a Biden plus 7 seat, but it's very left trending, or very right trending, which hurts Cuellar. He also doesn't really have a big cash advantage, and, Garcia is like a decent name in politics. But the caveat to that is that Cuellar outran Biden by like 15 points in 2020, and seats much bluer down ballot. So I think Cuellar will hold on this one time, but I think he'll lose in 2024 if he runs again. So yeah, Democrats losing or winning Texas 28. Utah, nothing going on there. Vermont, nothing going on there. Virginia, a few seats to do here. But I do think ultimately Spanberg is going to hold on probably by 4 or 5%. Yes, Lee Vegas made some controversial. Her opponent, Yes, Lee Vegas, made some controversial statements about abortion, and it's a left-trending suburban seat. Classic example of a seat where Republicans are hurt by this decision, the Dobbs decision. And then Virginia too. Like, I go back and forth. For now, I think out of a gut feeling, I'll say Jen Kiggins wins. But again, like, this is a Biden plus 3 seat. It's Luria is she's a candidate she's an incumbent who has a lot of money, and it's she that's very left trending. So I think it'll be fairly close when it's all said and done. Like, originally I thought it'd be kind of a blowout for the Republicans, but Dobbs really hurts the GOP in Virginia too. And then Washington 3, they're going to win probably by 10% or something like that. Again, it's only a Trump plus 4 seat, so it could be kind of close. But again, like, Democrats won't really be investing here, and ultimately Joe Kent will probably win by 10%. But on the other hand, Washington 8 is a seat that voted for Biden by 7, but Kim Schumer actually won the primary vote here by, I believe, 2%, and the primaries in Washington tend to be a bit more Republican than the general. On average, they're about 3% more Republican than the general. So if you apply that shift, she would win by 5. I think she wins by a little less personally, but either way, she's definitely the favorite at this point in time. West Virginia, nothing going on there. Wisconsin got a few more things to do here. I believe Wisconsin 3 and Wisconsin 1 are both likely Republican. These are seats that voted for Donald. This one voted for Trump by 5. This one voted for Trump by 2.4. Probably going to be fairly solid for the GOP. And Wyoming will obviously go Republican. So that's our House map. Again, that was like 46 minutes of content here. So I'm thirsty. I need to go get some water after this video because I've been talking for almost an hour straight. But yeah, that's that's my current House prediction. I know I went fairly in depth. I hope you enjoyed. If you watched all of that, you're a real one because that's a lot of stuff. But yeah, so thanks so much for watching. Again, if you have any disagreements or any comments, please tell me in the comment section below. But for now, yeah, that's where I stand as of today. And yeah, see you in the next one, guys. Be sure to like, subscribe, share with a friend, post on Twitter, complain in the comment section. So thanks for listening. I'll see you all next one. Bye, guys.